Thank you for staying so long into this very active and rich meeting into the last hour here. I appreciate your tenacity. And I'd like to share with you some of my latest thinking around reshaping, remaking, rethinking how we view love in day-to-day life. And I think there is enormous room to put love into these coaching relationships. Now, I'm actually giving a TEDx talk on this in a couple weeks, and I realized the subtitle of this will be, well, the title is Remaking Love, and then the subtitle is how to make love all day long without getting tired or fired. So I'm changing what the love is there so that you actually won't get in trouble using love in a coaching session. And using it in a much more modest, but in an extraordinarily powerful way. So I want to share that with you. Let's see, where's my control? Here we go. Ode to the Pep Lab again. They help me do what I do. So I already shared with you this morning this idea of how positive emotions broaden our mindsets and build our resources for the better. And here is more of an offshoot of this, okay? We know already that our awareness expands when we're feeling positive emotions, and that builds our resources for the better. That allows us to grow and become more resilient, more connected, all these good things. And I had, in positivity, written and spoken about how all positive emotions do this, equally the same. All positive emotions are nourishing us. And now I'm coming to think that there's one positive emotion that stands out as a superfood, in a way, one that nourishes us even more than the other positive emotions. And as you might suspect, I'm thinking about love here. But before we talk about love in particular, I want to point out one way that positive emotions expand our awareness is by unlocking our capacity to focus on others. Okay? When we're feeling any bit of threat, we don't think about others so much. We think about ourselves. And so much of our lives, so much of our days can be kind of wrapped up in a cocoon of self-absorption, reflecting the fact that we feel a little bit of threat all the time. So when we get that cocoon of self-absorption around us, we're not very successful at taking another person's perspective of really being focused on them. So positive emotions can be a great tool as a coach, I can imagine, for just being able to, okay, now I'm here for you. Allowing us to get past ourselves and to be really for others. One way that works is that positive emotions really fuel this capacity to think in terms of we instead of me versus you. Okay, you think collaboratively. And then the jargon of social psychology, we call that inclusion of the other in the self. That we see ourselves as larger than just us. We see our relationships with others as part of us, and our ties to others as part of us. And we've done some work to show that people are better able to take the perspective of another, someone they've just met, if they are experiencing a positive emotion. They can actually see things more from the other person's perspective. Some earlier work of ours demonstrated this in a really poignant context where we were working with a finding called the own race bias and face perception. And this finding could be renamed by a bigot as, oh, they all look the same to me. Okay, that idea that you can't really recognize individuals across racial lines. People are known to be particularly good at recognizing individuals if those individuals are their same race, and they're less good at recognizing individuals across racial lines. That's a very reliable effect shown in psychology. We found that if you make people, give people an opportunity to experience a positive emotion, even one as mild as a little mild amusement, that entrenched effect disappears altogether. And people are just as able to recognize an individual of another race as they are good at recognizing individuals of their same race. So that is extraordinarily important in working in diverse organizations and with a diverse clientele. Because you can't build lasting relationships with someone unless you can identify which person it is. So it's a foundation to developing a strong network. Now, I want to move past our earlier work that showed that positive emotions unlocked an other-focused perspective and turned to love. And in doing so, I need to be super clear about what love is not. What I found that when you try to talk about love from a scientific perspective, that sometimes you get tripped up by people have pre-existing views of love that they've kind of hard-won through their own life experience. And I need to ask you to set some of those aside to take in a different view, just for the span of this talk. After this talk, you can pick up your old views again or integrate them with these new views, or, you're free to do what you want. But I just want to be super clear about what, from an emotion science perspective, what love is not. So here are some things that love is not from this perspective. Love is not the same as sexual desire. Love is not the same as a special bond. It's not that soulmate relationship. It's not the same as commitment. Now, love has to do with these things, but it's not one and the same as these special bonds and commitments. And I'll explain more of that in a moment. Love is not exclusive. It's not something that we should necessarily limit to that inner circle of loved ones. Okay, so this is an emotional experience that can be much more widespread than just reserved for our loved ones. Here's a challenging one. Love is not lasting. And I'll explain why in a moment. But this image that we have of everlasting love, that's a wish. Emotions, and love is an emotion, I would argue. No emotion lasts forever. Okay? Not even the ones that feel so good. Okay, we have a commitment. Commitments can last forever. But love, as a specific emotion, does not. And one, I'm being intentionally provocative here. Love is not unconditional. And I'm using unconditional in a particular way here, and I'll explain it in a moment. But by this I mean that it doesn't emerge no matter what, regardless of conditions. That we can understand how to unlock love more if we understand the preconditions that it obeys. Okay, just for emphasis here, wipe those out. Just for the duration of this talk. All right, so if love isn't those things, what is it? And what I've done in this rethinking of what love is merge perspectives from relationship science and emotion science. These are two different areas of social psychology. They go into other areas of psychology as well, but they're two different areas of psychology that relate to one another, but have kind of stayed separate. And the two ideas about love that I'm borrowing or building on from relationship science have to do with, first, this idea that what seems to be at the core of many different kinds of love relationships, romantic love, parental love, the love you have for your friends, is this idea that in those kinds of relationships, we invest in the well-being of the other person simply for his or her own sake. Okay, that's a long jargon way of saying you care. Okay, that you care about the other person, not for some instrumental means, not because they're going to make you breakfast in the morning or grow up and be wealthy and then take care of you in your old age. You know, there's not some instrumental means. That in a love relationship, we care about how the other person is doing because we're invested in them. Okay, we're invested in their well-being. Okay, so that has been viewed as kind of an essential feature of love relationship that endures no matter what kind of love relationship it is. And another idea that comes from the relationship science angle is kind of the flip side of that. It's, how do you feel when someone cares about you in that way? And the jargon phrase that's been used in relationship science for that is perceived responsiveness. Now, I translate that into sort of everyday terms by saying, oh, that person really gets me. I feel understood, cared for, and validated. Those are sort of the aspects of perceived responsiveness. So when somebody else cares for you just for your own sake, you feel seen. You feel like they get you. Okay, so there's a way that that care is enacted, and there's a way that that care is felt. Okay, so the key here is that these go back and forth. That intimacy is investing in the well-being of the other, and then feeling like they're investing in you that way and that they get you. Okay, so these go back and forth, and there's a reciprocal care or mutual care. So those are two really important bedrock ideas from relationship science about intimacy. What emotion science can add to this is something that I think is missing from this perspective. And that is, first, it gives a biobehavioral framework. That love is an emotion, and emotions by definition are not just these abstract ideas that we carry in our minds. They are deeply physical experiences. They involve both mind and body at the same time. Whereas these ideas from relationship science seem kind of abstract concepts instead of really grounded in physiological experiences. And also, I think something that emotion science can uniquely add, which is super vital, is a momentary lens. And this momentary lens is important is that, you know, if we're really honest with ourselves, even for those people that we love, we're not constantly and steadily investing in their well-being. For instance, right now, while I'm giving this talk to you, I have no idea what my husband is doing, and I'm not paying any attention to him. So in that moment, I'm not actually sharing this mutual care with him. Okay? I'm doing something else. I'm lecturing to a room full of folks. So a momentary lens acknowledges that these experiences of mutual care ebb and flow. Okay, that they occur in a micro moment and then they dissipate. Okay. And another thing emotion science can add is this broaden and build theoretical backdrop. And why this is useful is that it helps us see that there are some properties of the experience of love that some attributes, some correlates that we see right in that micro moment. And then those micro moments, as they accumulate and compound, they build other things in our lives. They can build a commitment. They can build trust. They can build those special bonds that we have with others. Okay, so it offers this lens of, or this framework of saying there's some of the benefits of the emotion that show up in the moment and others that show up after an accumulation over time as a response to having more of this in your daily diet. Okay, so the formal definition that I offer, and this is what the book Love 2.0 is structured on, is that from this perspective, this mashup of relationship science and emotion science, love is an interpersonally situated experience that's marked by momentary increases in shared positive emotions. So it's an emotional experience where you feel a positive emotion, the other person feels a positive emotion, and there's, at that moment, there's some biobehavioral synchrony, and I'll unpack this concept in a moment, but there's a synchrony that unfolds both in gestures and behaviors and in our biology. And there's also a mutual care involved. That these kind of three aspects of the micro moment, a shared positivity, a synchrony, and mutual care, are kind of like strands in a braid. And that when that braid comes together multiple times, over time it builds a sense of embodied rapport. You leave that interaction saying, oh, we really clicked, we really got along. And it builds, over more time, it can build social bonds that are lasting, that creates our category of loved ones in our lives. And it can create commitments and trust and loyalty. Okay, trust and loyalty and commitment don't come out of nowhere. They come out of experiences like these micro moments of connection. And so what I'm arguing is that love is these micro moments of positive connection that might be redescribed as positivity resonance. Okay, when my positive emotion meets yours and we start to come to feel the same way and we have a mutual regard and care for each other, and for a moment our emotions kind of reverberate off each other, and then eventually they dissipate. Okay, so it's like they can crescendo a little bit in where my positivity builds your positivity and your positivity builds mine. So I want to explain why I think love is not unconditional. And basically I'm arguing that there are at least two preconditions that need to be met before people can enjoy and experience these micro moments of positivity resonance or micro moments of positive connection. And that is that we need to feel safe. The first is that we need to feel safe. And this is actually perhaps the most poignant reason why people have serious constraints on the amount of positive connection they feel in daily life, is because they don't feel safe. Now, safety is something we create for ourselves. I mean, sometimes there are ways other people make things unsafe for us, but a lot of times our safety is governed by how we're perceiving our current circumstances. And we know from research in clinical psychology that people who are depressed, socially anxious, and lonely, chronically lonely, perceive the world as less safe than everybody else. Okay, and there is also some work to suggest statistically most moments are safe. Okay, the things that we feel threatened by usually aren't happening in the moment. Sometimes they are, but those are rarer moments. Most moments, I like to say, most moments nobody's putting pins in your eyes. Okay, most moments you're not, don't have, you know, something actively working on you. It's usually that we're carrying around some feeling of unsafety from a previous moment, or worried about a possible unsafety in the future. Okay, so that's love's first precondition. The second one is really vital as well, and that is that this recognizes that we're creatures. You know, we can't connect in these ways in the complete abstract. We try to, but I think connection, and by this I mean a real-time physical connection. That can happen when you're physically co-present in the same space. It happens when you make eye contact with another person, but of course you can make eye contact with one other person. You can't make eye contact with a group all at once. It can happen with touch, and it can certainly happen with shared voice. Because I know a lot of people do coaching over the phone. So much emotional information is carried by tone of voice and intonation, and that's because so much of our sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system affects the vocal tract and affects how we express verbally and non-verbally in the paralinguistic aspects of speech. So for this kind of reverberating positivity to emerge, you need to be able to catch somebody's emotions in real time. Okay. So things that aren't up here are text-based offline connections. Now, I'm not saying that those can't be positive. You know, someone could write an impassioned love letter or tweet or something, and maybe a different context, but you could be feeling really upbeat while you write it, and then someone could feel really enlivened and upbeat when they read it. But each person is kind of having their own positive emotion in isolation there. They're missing the opportunity of kind of reverberating off each other and building that emotion. Okay? So I'm not saying that offline communication doesn't have positivity in it, but it may not have positivity resonance in it. And there's most of the research that I draw on this connects a lot to eye contact. So, but when I'm going to feature eye contact here, I'm not saying eye contact is the only physical channel through which positivity resonance occurs. But that's where a lot of the research has been. Now, we know from the science of people's responses to facial expressions that one facial expression grabs our attention more than any others, and that is the smile. Now, some earlier research suggested that angry faces actually pop out the most, but when you control for all the possible confounding factors there, it's actually the smile. Okay? The smile grabs our attention. It grabs our eye. And when it does, it produces contagion. Because eye contact, other studies show, creates a facial mimicry. Okay? This was a study done with avatars, actually. And what they did is, let's see, in the top row, everybody's got a subtle smile. In the middle row, it's neutrality. And down here, it's kind of an angry face. Okay, and they're trying to control the intensity and the mouth closed and all of them. But in this column, the avatar is looking right out at the participant in the study, and then there's the gaze averted, and then that's retraced over here. And what they found in participants who were wearing facial EMG sensors is that there's no mimicry of the avatar's face when the gaze is averted. When the gaze is straight on, there's mimicry. Okay, so eye contact unlocks facial mimicry in really potent ways, and a lack of eye contact messes that up. Now, a lot of times people will mention things like FaceTime or Skype with a camera and saying, well, we get eye contact there, don't we? Just pay attention next time. It's very difficult, if not impossible, to get the eye contact right when the camera is up here and the image is down here. Okay, so you're kind of looking in the general direction of somebody, but you can't really make eye contact. So you're more in those kinds of situations. You're more like in these situations of a gaze averted. Now, mimicry, facial mimicry is so important is because it creates the opportunity for intersubjectivity. Now, when we mimic another person's facial expression, we're not just mimicking that facial expression. Our brains begin to mimic and simulate what's going on in the other person. Okay, it starts with eye contact and facial mimicry, but then there starts to be a neural synchrony as well. And that neural synchrony is part of its job is to help you know what the other person is thinking. So to create the same perspective or the same thought patterns across two people at once. So mimicry creates intersubjectivity, and one of the brilliant pieces of this work by Paula Niedenthal is that she argues that mimicry does this, but the moderator of it, or the doorkeeper of it, the gatekeeper, is eye contact. Okay, so she puts a strong, very strong role for eye contact as either allowing this to happen or preventing it from happening. Okay, so I want to turn now to this idea of biobehavioral synchrony, and I came across this lovely piece of conceptual art which captures sort of our notions of what perfect lovers are, completely in sync. Now, certainly we see that in the animal world as well, and we see it in our research lab. These are still shots from videotapes of participants who agreed to have their images shown in contexts like this. And these are people who didn't know each other before the start of the study, and we had them engaged in a self-disclosure task where they get to know one another. And we find in this study that people generally feel positive emotions, but beyond the effects of their positive emotions, whether they show a behavioral synchrony, a nonverbal synchrony, predicts how connected and attuned and how much rapport they feel with the other person just 40 minutes later. So to the extent that they start to mimic each other's gestures, we can predict how much rapport they'll report feeling. And so synchrony, when it's synchrony of facial expressions or synchrony of gestures, is the kind of synchrony we can see with our eyes. There's much more to synchrony than just what we can see with our eyes. There's new work to show that when parents and their infants are engaged in this synchronous positive connection, face-to-face play, they also show synchrony in their biochemical cascades, especially in oxytocin. Oxytocin has sometimes been called the love hormone or the connection hormone. It's actually been upgraded from hormone to neuropeptide because it's found to act in the brain. But what we learn is that it's through these moments of positive engagement that there's intergenerational transmission of oxytocin, so that there's and it doesn't show up if there's less nonverbal engagement. Okay, so when the parents are a little clumsy in interacting with their child in terms of not quite able to get those smiles out or a little distracted themselves, there's no oxytocin synchrony. Okay, so the oxytocin synchrony doesn't emerge no matter what, just because you're the parent. It depends on the behavioral engagement and the positive behavioral engagement. And then there's some new work actually coming out of Princeton that was really inspiring to me that shows that when we are really listening closely to another person and really following the ups and downs of their story, that in that moment, the listener and the speaker have very similar brain activities. Okay, what Uri Hassan, the lead scientist on this work, has described it as, it's not like speaking is one brain activity and listening is another. Communication is the same process that's happening across two different brains. Okay, and this isn't just one isolated mirror neuron area of the brain. This is kind of whole brain synchrony. That when we're really connecting with someone, when we're really tracking what they're saying, our brains are pretty much doing the same thing. Okay, so it's another place of this hidden synchrony that's happening in these micro moments of connection. So in a way, you could argue that love is a mini mind meld. But from this perspective, I would have to say that Spock got a couple things wrong. He's not making eye contact. I guess he's using touch instead. But of course, Spock is also famously unemotional. Okay, so we humans can get into this mind meld, really understanding what another person is thinking when we bring positivity to that connection. Now, another way to describe this again is that there's a physical connection through touch, through body movement, through dance, through cheering. Eye contact in this case creates a synchrony in heart rhythms. There's new work that shows that people who are particularly empathic, when they're talking to their spouses, they and their spouse have similar heart rate variability. Whereas when people's empathy is lower, their heart rate variabilities are unconnected. Okay. So this is describing love as positivity resonance. Now, when my son, who was actually traveling with me on this trip to Boston, first saw this slide, he said, "Mom, you need to explain to people that positivity resonance doesn't make one person's head bigger than the other." That this was a picture of a parent and a child. He was worried that people might think, one person's head gets bigger. So now that we've cleared that up. Okay, what this new perspective offers is a new take on what a smile is for. And I want to walk you through a number of different perspectives on the evolutionary value of smiles through the history of psychology, modern psychology. Now, Paul Ekman, his work on the universality and facial expressions takes the view that a smile is a readout of the smiler's inner state. Okay? There's an opposing view that was offered about a decade ago now, is that actually the real function of a smile is not to express one person's, the smiler's state. It actually is to pull out positivity in another person. And that's the true evolved function of a smile, according to Bakarowski and Oren. Now, drawing on Niedenthal's take, she has what she calls the simulation of smiles model, which suggests that eye contact creates neural synchrony, and that creates an intersubjectivity. You could say that a smile triggers this ability to think like the other person. Like maybe that's the evolutionary perspective on or the value of a smile. There's another take on smiles and laughter that comes out of this really nice paper. I guess I'm a little biased because it extends the broaden and build theory, but I had nothing to do with it. But it connects the broaden and build theory with work on mirror neurons and this Bakarowski and Oren take on how positivity pulls out positivity, or smiles and laughter pull out positivity in others. And they argue that, in a way, that smiles serve to broaden collective mindsets and build collective resources. And to this I would say, well, I think it's all of the above. I think that these views have been focused too much on the individual, the smiler or the smilee, and not enough on that transaction that's going on between people. And a smile, in a way, is a bid to create this life-giving nutrient of positivity resonance. Now, I want to share with you some of the research that convinces me this is life-giving. So, is love the supreme emotion? Is it more life-giving than other positive emotions? Now, this comes out of my research where we've been, for years, testing the build hypothesis of the broaden and build model by randomly assigning people to change their daily diets of positive emotions. And by investing in the lifestyle change effort of learning meditation. So learning to self-generate love through this ancient Buddhist practice of loving kindness meditation. It goes by the word metta or maitri. I don't have time to go into details on loving kindness meditation here, but Love 2.0 the whole second half of it features it quite a bit. And then the website that accompanies that book, that is free for everybody, is positivityresonance.com. And there's guided meditations there that you can experiment with if you are interested. And what we know from this work is that investing in meditation in this way increases people's positivity and builds resources. I've talked about these this morning. Mental resources, social resources, psychological resources, and physical resources. And in more recent work, we've wanted to really look at that connection between social resources and health, and really understand how this practice of loving kindness meditation is working on both of these together. And to do that, we turned our attention to the vagus nerve. Now, the vagus nerve is your 10th cranial nerve that runs from your brainstem to your heart, connects your brain to your heart, and it connects to other internal organs as well. And it's part of what's sometimes been called the calm and connect system of your autonomic nervous system, which is the parasympathetic nervous system. And the health and functioning of your vagus nerve is indexed by what's called cardiac vagal tone. And that is a measure that is captured non-invasively in a number of different ways. One way is to just look at variability in heart rate, so within a particular frequency. Another way is to measure heart rate and respiration together, and this is the way we do it in my research lab. And it's the pattern of high cardiac vagal tone is one where your heart rate becomes entrained with your breathing in a way that your heart rate speeds up a little bit while you're breathing in and slows down a little bit when you're breathing out. So that's very subtle arrhythmia in your heart rate, very subtle variability. Faster when you breathe in, slower when you breathe out is healthy. Low vagal tone, low cardiac vagal tone is indexed by a pattern of, someone has a pretty high heart rate no matter whether they're breathing in or breathing out. That their heart rate is not entrained to their breathing. Okay, and that is taken to reflect the pattern of high cardiac vagal tone, which has that subtle arrhythmia, subtle variation in heart rate, is been associated with better physical health. It's associated with better cardiovascular health, better ability to regulate glucose levels, and a better ability to regulate inflammation. So it's a central aspect of health that connects to many different aspects of our physical health. From a psychological angle, cardiac vagal tone has proven to be very interesting as well, because people with high cardiac vagal tone have been shown to be better able to regulate their attention, better able to regulate their emotions, and because of those two, better able to have social engagement or have better social skills. Okay, so high vagal tone is a good thing. In many ways, it's been viewed, though, as stable as people's height. That is just kind of a attribute about you that doesn't change so readily. In early childhood, it changes quite a bit, but it was thought that after middle childhood, it's fairly steady, a fairly steady trait of a person. And what we found, though, is that actually it's not so steady, but it doesn't change overnight. It changes in step with our emotional habits, our typical social and emotional habits. In particular, we find that replicating past work, people with high vagal tone show more positive connections with people in daily life. Okay? But the new piece that we were able to show is that people who show more of these micro moments of positivity resonance in daily life actually show improvements in vagal tone 3 months later. Okay, so there's a reciprocal upward spiral relationship here that in a way you could see this as each social interaction, each micro moment of connection is serving as a bit of a tune-up to our cardiovascular systems, making us just a little bit healthier. So we did a randomized controlled trial to test this effect. And our experimental intervention was to randomly assign people to learn loving kindness meditation or not. So I don't think people who are in our control group just always sat around like that, but that's just one image of not meditating. And our prediction is that would increase people's positive emotions, which would improve their ability to make these micro moments of connection in daily life, and that would help them develop this higher marker of autonomic regulation, this cardiac vagal tone, improvements in cardiac vagal tone. And these two, random assignment to this condition should be more effective for those who start off with higher vagal tone. So this is a spiral that I think occurs in daily life, and we kind of budged the spiral by giving people this new skill. Now, okay, this is the statistical model that tests the conceptual model I just showed you. Fear not, I will not walk you through this, but just know that under the hood there's some complex statistics that help us isolate the active ingredients in this spiral in this order. So statistically, we can say that the loving kindness meditation first increases positive emotions in daily life, and those higher positive emotions, that higher openness, seeds or builds our capacity to make more positive connections with others in daily life. And it's those positive connections with others that's most directly related to the improvements in cardiac vagal tone. It's from this kind of statistical analysis that we can say it's not just meditation that did this. It wasn't just that you sat down and breathed differently for a few moments out of your week, but it was that that practice improved positive emotions, which improved or increased people's moments of positivity resonance in daily life. And that's where the increase in cardiac vagal tone came from. We're able to isolate statistically the active ingredients there. So if people meditated and didn't experience positive emotions and didn't experience the positivity resonance, they didn't get that cardiovascular benefit. We've done some other work which really puts to the test, if you just go in there and change people's perceptions or increase their ability to savor their connections with others, we can also improve people's vagal tone. And this also helps us isolate that the positivity resonance is a causal mediator, not just a correlational mediator. And so in the world of building psychological models, that's an important distinction. But for here, what I can share from this research is that this is a study that didn't use meditation at all. All we did was ask people to, at the end of the day, for a number of weeks, ask yourself two questions. Think about your longest social interactions that you had today and rate those interactions as a set as how connected did you feel to the people you were with? How attuned to them did you feel? That when people reflect on connection in this way, they also show improvements in cardiac vagal tone 3 months later. It's not as powerful as the effect of loving kindness meditation, but it is something that works regardless of whether people start off with high or low vagal tone to begin with. So this is sort of an equal opportunity intervention that's really, it's what I call a micro intervention because it really doesn't take any time at all. Oh, maybe a minute, maybe a half a minute. Okay, so I want to tell you a little bit about what's on the horizon for our research lab. I've been collaborating with Professor Steve Cole from UCLA, and we've been looking at how all of this relates to a pattern of gene expression in the immune system that is associated with health. And what we know from Steve Cole's past work is that adversity and threat and loneliness and all the bad stuff is predictive of a particular pattern of gene expression in the immune system that is associated with higher inflammation. And that sets us up for all kinds of chronic illnesses. And what we found in some of our early work is that certain forms of well-being are most opposite of that pattern of adversity. And in particular, the kind of well-being that we get from feeling like we're connected to something larger, that we have a purpose, that we feel like the world makes sense to us, okay? And that sort of I'm connected to something larger than myself kind of well-being has its own kind of fingerprint in our gene expression profile, where we're really able to say that well-being is affecting us at a cellular level. And now that was just the research that we have so far. Actually, just we had a paper come out in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences this past summer on that, was just the kind of low-hanging fruit from our correlational, our cross-sectional correlational assessment. What we've just completed is a longer-term randomized controlled trial where we randomly assign people to learn loving kindness meditation or mindfulness meditation or be in a waitlist monitoring control group. And before and after, we took blood samples, and we'll look at whether within individual we see changes in gene expression reflective of their increased experiences of positive emotion and positivity resonance. So stay tuned for that work. So again, what I've tried to build the case for today is that we can appreciate love in more ways if we look at it from the heart's perspective. If we look at how these micro moments of connection are appreciated by our physical hearts, not our cartoon heart, but our actual, that muscle in our chests that keeps us alive. So love is micro moments of positivity resonance. There's a beautiful restatement of this that I came across in an art historian's description of day-to-day micro-utopias. I think we've all kind of given up on the idea of there being a macro-utopia, a place that you move into and is wonderful all the time. Okay? That doesn't exist. But that doesn't mean there aren't these micro-utopias that we can create and create more of to try to build our own health and other people's health and spread well-being socially. So I just want to close with this quote that I really appreciate when I think of remaking love. It says, "Love doesn't just sit there like a stone. It has to be made like bread, remade all the time, made new." So with that, I want to thank you for your attention and open up to questions.
Barbara, could you tell everyone about the happiness genes and your wonderful study? Because I think they really need to hear that.
Okay. So what Pam is asking to hear more about is this work that we published this summer on different kinds of happiness and how they are related to this particular pattern of gene expression. And I just touched on it a little bit, but one of the things that we did was we looked at different forms of happiness in the same way that Aristotle carved them up some millennia ago into hedonic well-being and eudaimonic well-being. And for those of you who might need a refresher on those two categories, hedonic well-being is the I feel satisfied, I feel interested, I feel happy. It's in a way, the sheer positive emotion piece of it. And eudaimonic well-being Is that associated with higher meaning or purpose, of making a contribution, of being there for others? And the important thing to know about these two forms of well-being is that it's not a typology. It's not that some people have hedonic well-being and other people have eudaimonic well-being. They go together, okay? Some of the early work in positive psychology, I would say here, Marty Seligman's work suggested that they were a typology. They're not, okay? So my own work shows that positive emotions can be a springboard for building meaning, okay? So that's the broaden and build phenomena. And yet, there's, even though they each serves, they exist in this upward spiral pattern with one another, that hedonic well-being helps us get to eudaimonic well-being, which then brings us hedonic well-being. There is some daylight between these constructs. They're not one and the same. So one way to think of it is that you could be reporting more hedonic well-being or more positive emotion than would be warranted by your meaning and purpose and connections. Or you could be experiencing more meaning in ways that is not being matched by your positive emotions. So you could be sort of on the off diagonal. Although most time they go together, there's some times where they diverge. And we looked at that divergence to see basically what happens when people have more hedonic well-being than would be expected by their levels of eudaimonic well-being or meaning and purpose. And that excess you might consider sort of the empty calorie positivity, you know, sort of like and maybe it's literally going along with hedonism, like a little bit too much excess. Or it could be going along with self-deception. You know, I think I'm really happy, but then the rest of your life isn't really going along with that, okay? What we found was that people who had what might be called a hedonic predominance, that they had much more satisfaction than their meaning and purpose would predict. The signature in the gene expression looked a little bit like adversity. That was a surprise to me. Whereas people who had the eudaimonic predominance, they had more meaning and purpose than their satisfaction and pleasure would give, would make sense. Showed the opposite pattern. They had a healthier pattern of lower inflammation in this pattern of gene expression. And the way I think of it is that, going back to a broaden and build perspective, positive emotions are fleeting, but they build resources that are lasting. And so that eudaimonic well-being is like a lasting, durable resource that you can benefit from even during tough times when you're not feeling much enjoyment, okay? So, but the opposite is less true, that you're not benefiting from this feeling just pure positive emotions if they're not building, if it's not building resources for you, okay? So the surprising piece in that was that, well, when I look at it from different angles, it's not surprising. But what's striking is that the hedonic well-being looked like a small adversity. So it's like there was more pro-inflammatory gene expression with that pattern. But what this tells us is that between these two kinds of well-being, the one that's more directly related to cellular health is the eudaimonic well-being. And another way to put that is that positive emotions, when they build resources, build health. But when positive emotions don't build resources, they're not building health. Okay, so thank you for that opportunity to say a little bit more
So
there.
Dr. Fredrickson, over here, I think we've only got time for just this one last question.
Okay, great, thanks.
Can you just tell me the second question that you suggested we ask? Every day, the longest social connection you've had?
Right. So both of the questions have to do with you first think of your 3 longest interactions, and then thinking of those as a set, ask yourself, how connected did I feel with the people I was with? And how attuned to them was I? At least that's my memory of the questions. That's the gist of it. The actual questions are on page such and such in Love 2.0. That question is close enough. It's either connected, attuned, or I think that's what it is. Yeah. What they are, we discovered this completely by accident. Those are 2 items from the UCLA loneliness scale that when we added them to our studies, they alone were psychoactive and improved people's positive emotions and vagal tone. So we discovered that one completely by accident. But it's been very telling for us. Thanks. Okay.
Great. Thank you, Dr. Fredrickson.